Do we get a countdown? I mean, 5, 4.
3, 2, 1. Showtime. What's up, Moto Buddies? This is Mike from Baja Taco Tours and Taco Moto Co. And we are live on our weekly chit chat show, Taco Moto Co. Talks, Tech Talk with ... Tonight we have Brian Englund. Brian, if you follow any of the social media stuff regarding Moto, you've probably seen Brian, you probably follow him, you probably have bumped up against some of his content, pictures, stories. This guy is a little bit legendary, especially, look at him being humble, especially in the Northwest. If you are a moto rider in the Northwest, you know this guy, you've ridden with this guy, you've heard of this guy. And then up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is his good buddy, David Peterson. David Peterson is the CEO, CFO, the head dude at Best Rest, and is also a Northwest guy, more of an ADV guy. You're probably running his products on your bike, or you have his tire pump in your saddlebags. And so he's a known guy and has been around a long time too. And so, you know, primarily we had Brian jump in because I wanted to have Brian on because I've been following Brian and have admired the way he has chosen to live his life and involve moto in his life as deeply as he does. And then with his kids, you can see a lot of the involvement with his kids. And so I think he's doing a really good job sort of role modeling a lot of that stuff to us, to the moto community. And so that's why I wanted to have him. And then Brian thought it would be rad to have his best bud, David, on. And so David's going to be here through the chat, contribute a lot.
You need to get some other friends. If I'm the best you can do, you need better friends.
The best of the best of the best with short notice that was available.
Is that a short joke? Because, you know, I'm very sensitive about that.
I know. I got to get my licks in public.
And so it begins. Good. Okay. So let's start with, I got a couple of general questions that I wanted to talk to you guys about. Where some of the things, I think, just to give you a heads up of where the conversation is probably going to go. We're going to talk about all of our bikes and some of our first bikes that we've had, and figure out kind of how we got into moto, how that all started. And I want to talk about what it's like to use moto as sort of a therapeutic model or resource to just keep our heads straight, keep our heads in line, and how we do that individually. I want to talk about the Pacific Northwest because you guys represent that area and do a really good job advocating for it. And there's a bigger moto community up there than I was aware of. And there's manufacturers up there I want to talk about, get involved, just kind of touch on. And so it's always been a surprise to me just how big the Northwest is in terms of like the moto community. So we're going to talk about that. And Brian's kids are welcome to hop in here at any time and contribute. And I want to hear race stories from them. Yes. So let's start with Brian. I got a question straight up for you. Tell me about your first bike and how long did you own it?
Oh man, this is great. So my first bike, no kidding. And I think my best bud, Nate Bellio, is actually logged in right now, probably watching this, because I looked it up in the classifieds. So, you know, like classifieds in the newspaper, that used to be a thing. David will remember, probably nobody else will. But I looked it up in the classifieds, and it was a 1985 Honda Shadow 500, VT 500C, like the tiniest little twin and the tiniest little shaft drive ever. So we can admit I've owned 2 shaft-driven bikes in my lifetime. But anyway, I looked it up, and to this day, I remember in the classified ad, it said it's candy apple red sweet. And I knew that was the bike for me. And I ran over, and I looked at it, and it fired up, and it was good, and that was as much of a check on that thing as I was able to do. And then I had my buddy Nate come over and ride it home for me because I couldn't ride.
You still can't.
Yeah, I know. I do crash pretty prolifically, so I like to maintain, you know, some things as a constant. But man, I had that bike from I was in college, so it'd be like 1997 or 8 until I came back from Korea the first time, and that would be 2002. And fun fact, I rode that little 500 back before adventure biking was a big thing on the internet, because the internet wasn't a big thing. I rode that thing from Phoenix, Arizona all the way to Rochester, New York in 10 days. And quite possibly one of the most painful events of my entire life. I look back on it pretty fondly right now, but I was not very happy by the end of that trip. But I had to get back and get to school.
Okay, so how did that bike end? What became of it?
So you know how guys will tell you like, oh, that was the most expensive oil filter I ever bought, because I walked into the dealership to get a new oil filter and I walked out with a brand new KTM whatever. That's essentially what happened. Is I came back from Korea. It had been parked for about a year at Nate's apartment, and went to fire it up. And then he goes, "You got to see this." We rode over to the local dealership, a Kawasaki dealership outside of Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, and they had a 2001 Kawasaki Concourse in metallic pearl silver, I think it was, something like that. And that thing blew my hair back, and it was awesome. And I snapped that. I traded on the spot. As a matter of fact, I drove from Fort Walton Beach, Florida, up to see him for the weekend and pick that bike up. Told my wife I was bringing back this little Honda Shadow she'd seen pictures of, and then came back with an entirely different bike. And well, welcome to being married. That was 17 anniversaries ago.
And she's been putting up with nonsense like that ever since. Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. We've fairly well defined that I have no self-control when it comes to motorcycles, and it's just her cross to bear.
Just to jump off that, how many motorcycles do you own right now? I've seen pictures where there's at least a dozen.
Do we want to talk about ones that run? I think I have the fixing.
Yeah, anything with anything.
What qualifies as a motorcycle for Brian? Is it just an engine or is it a frame?
Yeah, I'm looking at frames, man.
I might need to bring this thing down and look around real quick, because I have a lot of work out here. Yeah,
Brian, let's do the tour right now. Let's do it.
All right, so this 450, God, it's really hard to hold the camera right. All right, so that 450 with a 525 in it is going to go down to Baja in about 3 weeks. I'm headed up to Cyclops in a week or so to do some lighting upgrades on it, so it's not a total disaster. And then over here, and that's a 05 450 MXC with a 525 in it. And then, I see the lighting is pretty difficult here, but if we look, we have the mighty 950 Super Enduro, a 2010 450 XCW that blew up because the XC4 motor sucks, and I'll bet a lot of people will hate me for saying that, but I'll say it. Oil transfer really sucks. And let's see, a 520 that I rescued from the desert in Saudi Arabia and smuggled back into the U.S. as parts. I hope the statute of limitations is over on that. When we get beyond that, we got my daughter Lex's 525. That was her birthday present for dual sport bike that she rode the Wobbler on like the next day after she turned 16. And there's a few others over here. Oh, yeah. So her 200, my son's 105, my 300 with chainsaw mounted. My other son's 125. And then let's see. If Chris Fant, can you see it? That stupid KX back there? That thing has been the longest project ever. It's been here since 2017. And I finally bought the last part I needed about a week ago on eBay. So that guy will go back together. It's a KX 100. And then, up in the rafters, there's a few more. There's a couple of frames and, whole stack. Yep, that's about how the garage rolls right there. A couple of motors in various stages of repair and disassembly. Yep, XR250. I'm kind of obsessed. Like I said, I have no self-control. There's one I'm building for my buddy Blaze once we figure out how to get the gear stacks together. It's a 05 250 SX, I think. And over there somewhere is that 450. So that's most of it. There's probably more around here somewhere.
Okay, so rough count. Are we talking about 18, 19 bikes there? Yeah.
No, I think it's like 11 or 12 that run, and a couple that are going to be long-term projects that are just basically baskets of parts.
Okay, and at any given time, how many bikes are running? Did you say 11?
Yeah, I would say 11 out of 12 are running right now.
Oh, hold on. You got to understand that Brian's bikes run for about an hour, and then they shit the bed.
That's all I need.
Yeah, but you're 2 hours into the ride, so you got to push it back to 3. Brian doesn't have very good
Hurts myself, but I've only been pulled out, I think, once. I've self-recovered a couple of times, but if Richard Miller watches this, he pulled me 20K out of the mountains out in British Columbia when my 950 fuel pump failed. That was an adventure.
So I want to get to some ride stories in a minute, but just still with the bikes. I just want to talk about bikes for a minute. Tell me about the Mexico bike that when you and I met down in Ensenada. You were on that 450, and then you had some camshaft issues, and there were problems with that. Walk us through some of that. What was going on with that bike in Mexico?
So I think it had multiple issues. First off, there was an oil jet that was plugged in the head. And it starved oil, and the rocker arm pins were scored up a little bit. Should have been okay enough to run for another couple of days. We got in there, we put new follower bearings in, and worked through the top end. Put 600 cc's of oil in there. If you remember, the XC4 is a dual sump, so it's got a transmission and a crankcase sump there, and filled it up the next morning, went out to ride LA Barstow to Vegas. About 3 hours later, it went ka-chunk at a speed that Keith Huff would tell me not to talk about. So we kind of skidded to a stop, and I said, ha, that's interesting. And when I finally got it home, I swapped onto my buddy George's WR450F, Filthy Phil, I think it was called, and rode the shit out of that for 2 days. I just punished it savagely. It was a great time. So the bike never quit, but it definitely did not have the suspension I needed for what I wanted to do. But yeah, I brought that 450 home and tore it apart. The head has got multiple holes in it. The piston has brand new piston, Thumper Racing 520 piston blown up. And then I drained like 100 cc's of oil out of it. So that's one of those fun little things you learn about after the fact, that oil transfer is a recurring issue with that XC4 motor. So I know all about it now, which is great. I have the whole thing torn, all the pieces, and it's ready to reassemble. And I ground out that section of the case that actually joins the two, and we'll see how that works out.
Single sumped it out. And then that first time you pulled the head apart, that was down in Ensenada, right? You guys did some serious engine work, or did you go to San Diego for that? Remind me.
Both. So we pulled it apart in Ensenada after. It sounded like a diesel motor. And that was because it was starving for oil up top. So we pulled it apart and got the jets cleaned out, and it was definitely flowing oil good. I knew there was some damage in there, and I needed to replace the rocker arm follower bearings, cam follower bearings. Sorry, I know what I'm talking about. I just can't think of the name. So we actually, no kidding, from a bar in Ensenada, I called Rocky Mountain ATV and had them overnighted and shipped to Joe DeRozier's in outside San Diego. He's if you don't know Joe, he's a character. He's Joe Haller, great dude, great welder. He sent me a note. He goes, dude, come to the house. And we ended up at the shop. We replaced those in the shop. There's a picture of my bike hoisted by a forklift so that you can walk under it and tack weld a couple of riv nuts that had kind of let loose in the frame for the bash plate after getting just smashed. And then we did a few laps around the place in his CR500 sidecar, which is outrageous, pretty terrifying. It was a good time. And then we piled everything back in the truck, and we hauled ass up to Palmdale to meet up with the rest of the crew for LA Barstow Vegas the next day.
Yeah, that bike is you right now you're merging the sump, the head is good, and you're going to put that back together. How are you going to trust it? Where are you going to take it?
I'm going to ride the shit out of it, and if it blows up, then okay, it blows up. But I'm getting more and more confident in the stuff that I build as I do more of them. So I'm going to put it together. I'm going to send it for a while. Like I don't need it. It's kind of an excess bike, but I'll ride it for a while to make sure that I'm confident in it, and then I'll probably sell it to a friend. That way, when it blows up. So one of the things I wanted to ask.
Okay, sorry to step on you there. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is I can see through your post over the couple of years your progression as a mechanic. You really seem to be stepping up. Your skills are better. I think the challenges you're taking on, like the motor work you're taking on, is getting more complicated. You're doing more and better and bigger things. And you're also pretty public about it too. And this is something that I like, is like when you blow something up or when something goes badly, you're really open and upfront about that, and you post pictures of it, and you are not afraid to like let people see these failures. I personally am. I blow stuff up. I mean, I'm doing bike work all the time, and if I ever post anything, it's only this stuff that came together well, not the carnage. But I like about you is that you're showing all that carnage. Are you not self-conscious about that, or do you think this is just to teach everybody that sometimes these things go wrong and you could be humble about it? Like, I like this about you. Where does that come from?
No, I think that's part of it. Is, you know, breaking dirt bikes is kind of, I mean, it's part of the experience, right? And part of what I'm getting at is, you know, like I mentioned, I started off on street bikes. I only got into dirt bikes probably 6 years ago. And I only started really working on them 4 years ago. But the idea is to just show that it's accessible. It's doable. You know, if a schmuck like me can figure out how to work on this, then probably anyone can. Or you can come over to my garage and we'll do it together. I had Byron Stuck from the Washington Off-Highway Vehicle Alliance in my garage last weekend. We built his 300 together. Mostly the kids built it, and I just heckled. But yeah, the idea is to show that shit happens. It's not the end of the world, and you can recover. And you can teach yourself. There's a lot you could do. You don't need special tools for a lot of what we work on.
David, talk about Brian and some of these like moto repair nights that he does. I see these posts and pictures where there's 20 guys over in the garage. What's happening?
Well, by full disclosure, I've never been to Brian's house. I've never been to his garage, mainly because there's a court order. But I don't want to talk about that.
I live next to an elementary school.
Yeah.
There might be a bunch of guys who aren't going over for that.
No, Brian and I have ridden together a couple of times. So, our FaceTime is not a whole lot, but I know Brian enough because I follow his stuff and kind of back channel chatter. Brian's not afraid to jump into it and ask questions or make mistakes, and he makes a lot of them. His kids help that in the sense that they do some things that maybe aren't quite right. And so Brian gets the opportunity to do a lot of repairs that most of us wouldn't. One of the kids forgets to put something in,
and again.
Doesn't tighten down a bolt, something snaps. So Brian, because he's trying to feed this 3-headed beast of his kids, trying to keep their bikes running, and the guy doesn't make enough money to hire somebody to do it. He's got to do it himself. So he's figured out how to do it. And I'd hate to think what his baling wire and duct tape bill is every month, because he's got to spend a lot on that stuff. But he's, clearly, Brian's not afraid to get his hands dirty, and he's kind of an inspiration. I hate to say it, and I don't want him to get any more, blown up than he already is. But I won't let Brian work on any of my bikes. But I think it's great that he is doing all this stuff. He's got a much better wrench than I am.
So, David, you're following Brian too on the socials, which is what I do. I've never been to his house either. I've only met him one time. We're in San Felipe last year for the 1000.
Was he sober?
What's that?
Was he sober?
It's questionable.
Okay.
Probably not.
It's questionable. So when we were down there, we had some fish tacos and met for the first time in person, and we hung out with him and some of his buddies. And I was super enchanted by like this whole little crew that they had, and fascinated by the whole aspect of the Northwest. I wasn't aware that there was so vibrant of a community up there. And guys like you, David, you are making and selling products in the Northwest. There's other guys too. Brian, you talked about Daryl with Cyclops. I know, like, for example, Ashley and Pete, Moscow Moto's up there in the Northwest. Like, rattle off, either one of you or both of you, who's up there in that area making and serving the moto products community from up there?
Of course, you've got SureTech, which everybody loves to hate. You've got Alt-Rider. You've got a couple of sidecar companies, although they're not so much into the dirt, but, sidecar builders up here.
DMC Cycles, pretty cool.
Yeah.
I had to make me a sidecar, by the way. Jay was awesome.
Yeah. There's me. I'm just a little fish, and that's all I want to be.
Loop right down the street in Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and then, my personal favorites, Cyclops, Daryl, and Sandra, and Greg, and the rest of the family there in Taryn. So they're great people. We hang out. And,
people, I've got a lot of Cyclops lights on mine, and I'm one of their dealers. So, I've been selling that stuff for a long time. The key in this whole motorcycle
trail
business, is not buy crap, but to buy good stuff. And just because somebody endorses it doesn't mean it's good. It has to be something that really works. And Cyclops is one of those things. My hat's off to Daryl.
Yeah, buy once, cry once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to give props to all those guys who are up there in that particular area, doing right by the moto community. And so some of those names of companies are led by people who are like legit good people. It's one thing to have a business and to sell a thing and then not put yourself out there as a personality. And I like that a lot of these, you've got Ashley and Pete, who I mentioned, and then you've got Harold with Giant Loop. They happen to be competitors of each other, but I think they're both examples of good people who are doing right by their customers and are active. And one thing that I like is that they go to shows and they meet their customers. There's companies out there that hide behind their products or they hide behind a catalog or a website. You never see them. You never meet them. You don't know who the people are because I think they maybe don't want to have that interaction with the customers. Maybe those interactions won't always go well. Maybe their track record isn't great, but I think in the Northwest, for some reason, we talked about Daryl and Cyclops, all those others that you mentioned, those are companies run by people who are good folks, right? And they're good writers. You guys know those. Is there something special and unique about the Northwest that I don't know about? Because down here in the Southwest, California, Nevada, Utah, not so much out of Nevada, but Utah, a lot of moto manufacturers and suppliers. Southern California seems to be more of the area where that's happening. And I am acquainted with some of the guys who run some of those companies in the Southwest, and the track record's not as good, honestly. I know quite a few guys that are in the business, but I don't want to hang out with them. But I would have dinner with anybody you guys had mentioned on that list. What makes the Northwest unique in that way?
I don't know.
We got a sense of humor to survive the rain for the other 5 months of the year. I don't know.
We got 6 months of suicidal and gray skies and 6 months of riding weather. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I've always kind of felt that the Northwest was the people up here are more of a do-it-yourself, not get into big group type of things. Just could be my perspective. Obviously, there's a lot more riders in Southern Cal than there, probably in one county than there is in all of Washington. But it's just a different group of people. Not any better, not any worse, just a different culture. I think that the trees and just the flavor of the Northwest breeds a different kind of a rider.
Yeah. I mean, I've ridden both, and I'll take the trees and the mountains any day.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the riding area up there. You guys have year-round riding. Is that the case?
You could.
There's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad gear, right? I think one of our companies has that motto somewhere.
Yeah.
You can ride all year if you're a dirt biker.
Yeah, obviously, up in the mountains, you're not going to be riding due to the snow, but you can go down into the flatlands here in the Puget Sound area and ride all year round, literally. You might have some snow. You're going to have some rain. You're going to have wet and mud and stuff like that.
Some rain.
You can ride all year round, but most guys don't do it. Their bikes are up on the lift for 3 months out of the year, and they're fixing everything they broke last year. So it's not a year-round thing for most people, but it could be.
Brian, are you riding year-round? Are you in your
Oh yeah. No, we ride all year long. Like David mentioned, we kind of ride the lowland stuff in the winter because you can't really get up high. I mean, we drove over Chinook Pass 2 days ago, and the snow is 10 feet deep where they've cut through it, and it was snowing on our way back. And this is that was June 6th. So the high stuff is just starting to thaw out. We're out there with chainsaws and trail crews and stuff like that all the time. But yeah, we ride pretty much all year round.
Let me ask you about cut and trail, because I've seen pictures of you guys with chainsaws. Tell me about how getting your children out there with chainsaws.
Well, I don't normally publish the pictures of the kids wielding chainsaws because people get uptight about that. Yeah, probably why I don't have my own YouTube channel. But I mean, I did a tally a couple of days ago. I work a lot with the Northwest Motorcycle Association in a sort of an ad hoc fashion. I try to get volunteers out there, and we try to be the change that we want to see. So we're out there working, especially now as the season is starting to open. I think in the last month, between the four of us, we have about 215, 220 hours of volunteer work invested in trails out there. And it's, I don't go anywhere with my 300 without a chainsaw mounted on it. And I haven't had a ride yet that I didn't at least cut some sort of deadfall out of the trail. The idea is to make sure the trails stay sustainable and passable. We don't sanitize. I don't make them easy. I don't cut stuff that's on the ground that's easily passable. But, when you get into single track and you have big 30-inch trees chest high that you can't drag a bike over or under, and they create like big bypass problems and stuff like that. Trail braiding, we call it, just creates a lot of damage. And it gives I don't want to call them our enemies, our rival user groups, the ammunition to talk about how we should be excluded from areas. So I try to be a good steward and a good ambassador of the sport, of the obsession of the ride of moto.
Okay. So that brings to mind a question that I wanted to bring up, a question I wanted to ask you. You are known to do a lot for the moto community. We talked about the little bike night. And I've been reading in the comments earlier, I read a comment where somebody had said, you changed their tires, like you're their tire guy. And I know from firsthand experience that a lot of guys come over with their bike issues, and then you're helping them out. You're telling me right now about opening trails, keeping trails open. All of this altruism that you seem to be flowing out into the moto community, where did that come from? My thought is maybe the military. You tell me.
I don't know what it is. Like it's good to be part of a community that you care about, right? I enjoy it. I'm good at it. Well, I mean, some would say I'm good at it. Some would say I'm not. But it's all about getting the message out there and making the sport accessible. And I look at it again and again, and I say, I want my kids riding, and I want their kids riding. And I know that there's some serious threat to long-term sustainability of moto access and the moto market and all that stuff. So every time I help someone out, I like to think that I'm helping their kids, or I'm helping their grandkids or something like that to stay on trails and get out there and go do it. Let's kind of jump into the military. I do want to get into that for a second here, because we were talking about this earlier before we went live. You are retiring out of the military. You've been deployed. You've been actively deployed. You spent time in units with other guys. I brought something up that I'd like to explore a little bit, and that is when you're with your little platoon, that group. I'm not sure what vocabulary word to use, but when you're with the guys that are in your unit, you're planning, you're working on equipment, you're looking at maps. It sounds to me, in a lot of ways, you're pre-planning a moto trip, and then you go and you execute, you do the mission, or you do the ride. See how I'm threading together these two things in parallel with each other, and then you come home and then you debrief and you fix things, and then you're instantly probably wondering and thinking about the next mission, the next ride. How similar is it being in the military with your brothers in the military and then being with your brothers on moto? Am I drawing am I reaching there, or are there parallels? I think it's more about the person than it is about the profession. But I mean, you go to what you know, right? And logistics and planning and after action reports and recovery and all of that stuff is, a huge part of what I did for the Army. And it translates over pretty successfully, I like to think, to planning our missions, our moto missions. I tell you what, if any of my NCOs are watching this, they probably got they're probably face palming, but they're probably also nodding along because I do a lot of non-commissioned officer work with my kids. Just about check your gear again. Do we have a checklist? Are we driving out of the neighborhood while Nate is still in the bathroom because the truck is so packed full that we forgot him? Stuff like that. Yeah, you just go with what you know, and planning and recovery and all of the logistical aspects and reading maps and saying, hey, maybe we could do this. Let's go find out. It's just kind of been a part of what I did for the last 20 years, and it translates over. And maybe that's why Moto is so appealing to me, because it provides that outlet that I can kind of continue to use my not so easily quantifiable skills.
Okay, so you're sort of.
I think you like a little bit of danger that goes with it too.
Yeah, I mean, if I wasn't, I'm clearly a risk-taking personality. I didn't, go to Ranger school and become a paratrooper and all that because I plan to shy away and, not face down dangers or risks or whatever. But that's actually another good one, is calculated risk. Trying to figure out, can we really do this trail as a family, or is it going to be too difficult, too dangerous? And I've probably erred on both sides of that decision a few times, and it's a learning process. But every time we go out there and we do something too hard, we go back later and it's not too hard anymore. So just pushing the limits and expanding our capabilities is big for me. It's huge for the kid.
Okay, so that is a perfect segue into your sort of like life philosophy, agoge. Agoge? How do you say that?
Team Agoge.
Yes. Talk about that. What is that word? What's the background? Why do you use it?
So I'll preface it by saying some smart philosopher will come in and say it's a terrible practice that was practiced in ancient Greece, and all kinds of nasty things about it. But the idea is the idealized, stylized version of it is that it's meant to breed a fierce loyalty to each other and to the family unit and to the greater whole of the community through shared hardship and challenge. And I mean, that's really glossing over what was a military indoctrination program for the Spartan youth of ancient Greece. But the idea is kind of the same. It's challenging and creating growth and creating opportunities for growth. And it's semi-guided, and sometimes it's like semi-feral children on a mountainside with dirt bikes, in a hailstorm. It's a little bit of everything, right?
Okay, so this philosophy, did you grow up kind of being supervised in that way?
I don't think so. I don't know. Hopefully my dad and my mom are logged in and watching this and getting ready to say angry things about me, but
they can blow up the comments if they like.
Oh, please do. Dad, do it.
Did you grow up?
He's got more smart ass comments about me than David, then my old man is probably the guy. No, it's something that based on my professional experiences, it shaped how I wanted to raise my kids. I spent a lot of time dealing with young people as an Army guy, and I just wanted to make sure that when mine are ready to leave the house and go do whatever it is they want to do, they're prepared to be adults in a world that I think, at least in a Western world, that doesn't really embrace that idea.
So when you were a leader in the military, you get these guys that come in. Did it make any difference based on whether or not they were this? I wonder, and I'd like to hear this about their background in sports, motorcycling, Boy Scouts. Were any of those things vehicles that you thought prepared a kid to face these like challenges and hardships that you're talking about?
I think so, but in the end, when I served mostly as a leader of a semi-finished product when I was in the Army, right? So guys are done with basic training. They're done with airborne school. They're done with all of these other tough guy, scare me badge schools. And they show up to me as a semi-finished product. But at the same time, you could see the guys who grew up. And I used to be really big in hand-to-hand combat training, right? Not so much for the ability to beat each other up, but because it creates a huge fitness, a fitness vehicle, if you will. And I think guys should have to triumph over adversity, and they should have to actually, face adversaries, adversity. And I found that a lot of people that came to me had never been hit before, and it always just kind of amused me. Like we get like a crop of new young paratroopers, and you'd ask like, "Hey, who's never been hit in the face before?" And hands would go up, and that's amazing to me because that's not how I grew up.
Okay, so when a guy grows up, when a teenager grows up, and he's riding dirt bikes and he's crashing and he's in the hailstorms and there's lightning going on and he's tired and he's still got 10, 20 more miles to go and his bike is leaking and all these calamities that befall us when we're out in sport, in motorsport, are these like training grounds? You're basically throwing all that at your kids. Your kids are going to be the only children who survive the Armageddon, I think, because I've seen them race. I've seen them rebuild motors. I've seen these kids do the unthinkable. Like adults aren't doing these kinds of things. You've got kids who clearly, and your kids and the cockroaches are going to like repopulate the world.
The question will be which is which. So to borrow a trite term, I could say like everything is training and training is everything, right? So everything we go out and do is an opportunity to learn and to become a better person. And it's not like it's all work, but I guarantee if we go out for a fun ride and nothing terrible has happened, Dad's gonna find like some crazy hill that we got to go try and climb, or But yeah, triumph over adversity is a huge thing with me and the kids. Whether that means Nate changed my tire the night before and forgot to torque down my axle nut, and we have to zip tie a spark plug wrench to my axle so that I could ride 8 miles out of the mountains. That sucked, but that was a great learning moment, right? I don't think we're gonna forget to torque that bolt. We also learned that shit happens, but it's not the end of the world. There's always another option. There's always another avenue to advance.
I gotta throw in a story about Brian's feral children.
Well, can't wait.
It's a good one. So we'd been friends for a while, and we went on a ride over at Shelton at the Shelton Dirt Rider thing. And the 3 kids, and they're bouncing around on their bikes, and Brian's on a pretty hot KTM. I was on my KTM, and off we go, and we head off into the woods. And I'm supposed to be a well-seasoned, experienced rider who knows what he's doing. And, I was doing okay for an old man. And it got harder, and it got harder. And the kids would, come along, and something would break, they'd fix it. They go into a water obstacle. The bike goes upside down, fills with water. So they take the bike upside down and they drain out the water. And it's cold and I'm shivering. And these
that crazy ride.
They're just doing it. So we rode a little further and we climbed this one hill. And I'm huffing and I'm puffing, trying to get to the top of the hill and get within 10 feet and fall over. The kids come and they help me get my bike up to the top of the hill. And then here comes, we did this 2 or 3 times. Here comes these kids. Their eyes are this big and they're hanging on and they're hitting the throttle and they're crawling up this trail. And sometimes they made it, sometimes they didn't. But they're really getting experience. But at the point where we got the furthest along the trail, we came to kind of a big swampy area. And by then, my ass was dragging. I looked back behind me, and it was 30 yards behind the bike. And I was exhausted. And Brian's got pictures of these 3 kids lifting me onto my motorcycle. You remember that, Brian?
I do.
They're helping me get up on the bike, and he took pictures of this. So all these little kids that have learned these skills and learned how to face these hardships, they were quite the treat to ride with. Brian's yelling at him. Yeah. Anyhow.
Okay, so tell me about racing, Brian. Your kids are out racing is it the Starvation Ridge race or the Desert 100? What are some of these Northwest races that you guys are doing?
So we kind of got out of racing. This year is a little bit weird anyway, but racing to us was kind of a vehicle to force all of the all of the stuff I talked about, the planning and the maintenance, and hey, work on your bike on Monday. Don't work on your bike on Thursday afternoon. And understanding like an Army term, like my burn rate, like how often do I need to replace brake pads? How often do these tires need to be done? What we found is it's tremendously expensive to race like 3 kids, and to try to do it right. And I can't even remotely do it right. I didn't have the time or the vehicles, and but yeah, what it turned into was an experiment to see how self-sufficient can you be. So we did a couple of seasons racing the Northwest Motorcycle Association off-road series. Solid sea-level riding, even though the youth divisions are not not necessarily separated up that way. It's like the 15 and under division for the most part. But what was more important was the experience. And I remember my first race that I showed up to, I didn't know what I was doing. I literally drove out. I told myself I was going to race, and I showed up, and I just started asking questions. And that's essentially what the kids had to do, because we raced a season, and the next year I was in Saudi Arabia for like most of the season. And what it turned into was my wife drove the big taxi and wielded the checkbook, and the kids were 100% responsible, on their own. And I'm doing like telemechanic work on FaceTime at 2:00 in the morning from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, walking them through procedures and stuff like that. And they're working on bikes, trying to get them ready to race every weekend. And, along the way, a great demonstration of how the community works. Friends popped in and said, I'll help you with this. I'll help you with that. Kid gets out to a race, the bike doesn't start. Next thing you know, there's 10 people from the next 2 campsites over there trying to help them out and figure out what the problem is. So it was a tremendous vehicle to learn self-sufficiency and self-reliance and planning and all the stuff that I just keep harping on. And then after a while, we got decent at it. I wouldn't say like short-term speed is our forte, but going back to that other note, long-term perseverance. So the kids have one first place finish in the Starvation Ridge 24-hour race. They have 1 second place finish. My daughter is the current youth Ironman champion, and I know both of my sons have designs to knock her off that throne in October. It's a sloppy, soupy, miserable mess most of the time out at Starvation Ridge. So Scott and Debbie, I love you, but man, your ranch is a real test of the rider's perseverance and the bike's ability to run in adverse conditions. But yeah, my youngest has raced the Desert 100 5 times now, and I'd have to check with Mike Clough and the Stump Jumpers out there, but he may be one of the youngest kids to ever complete it when he was 8 years old on an XR 100, which is pretty cool.
Holy crap. Is this the mullet master? Is that the kid we're talking about?
Yeah, the enduro mullet, the mulleted madman. I challenged that kid and told him when he was 16, I would put him in an El Camino if he had a mullet that was worthy of it. And, well, he was 12 when I told him that. He's 13 now, and he has a pretty magnificent coiffure going on. So I think he's going to win the bet. I think I'm going to be out in El Camino in about, 3 years or so. That dude is legitimately the toughest dude I think I've ever met. It's crazy.
So the comments, I've just been seeing a ton of comments here about the mullet. So you got that one. I don't know if you guys can see the comment thread over here on your screens, but I can. So we got that one.
I can see it.
We got this one here, the enduro mullet.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Okay,
so there's actually people watching this right now.
Apparently, yeah. So there's quite a few. The number fluctuates, but right now it's 45. We got 45 homies out there. All your friends probably
spent some time on the trail with the enduro mullet, because that's his superpower, other than like ridiculous hair, is the ability to fall asleep like instantly. So we'll do an 11-hour day where we saw a whole bunch of deadfall and stuff like that. And every time you turn around, we're over here sawing a log, and that dude is laid out on his bike, asleep, propped up against a hill, sawing logs on his own. I don't know how he sleeps that much. It's like a cat.
And okay, and then we got somebody who says, George says, just bring them out. Can you have them pop out and say hi at some point during this?
Well, see, the thing is, I just got home from school, and the kids know that when I come home, it's time to work. So the minute that I'm distracted, every one of them has disappeared. So
okay,
sorry, I can't trot the ball out.
We'll try to get them out and say hi, but yeah, before we finish, we'll try to get the kids out. Let me ask Dave a question. Do you have any racing in your background, Dave? How did you get into moto?
Well, my uncle had a motorcycle shop down in Southern California in Lompoc, and he had Harley and BSA and Triumph, and was one of the first Honda dealers in the U.S. So I've always been around bikes, and riding trail 90s in the backyard and stuff like that. My first race experience was in Montana, and I was riding the mighty, powerful Honda SL 100, which I probably weighed 95 pounds. And they didn't have a class for me, so I had to race with the 125s. And it wasn't a very big track and not very many participants, but I made it into the lead, and I was doing really well. And then I looked around, and there was nobody there. And I had so little experience, I didn't realize I was so far out ahead. So what did I do? I turned around to go back to see if everybody was okay. Well, I came in second. That was my single race experience. And I totaled that bike. I was out riding on my lunch hour, and I hit a railroad tie or something and endoed the bike and broke my arm and totaled it out. But yeah, I've always been on bikes. And, from the time I was so small, I was on the back of my dad's bike, falling off the back, till rode police bikes for a few years. I was a cop for a number of years, and you just always had a motorcycle. And then went into another career, and then found myself doing best dress stuff. So, it's full circle coming around. Now I'm in the motorcycle industry and kind of semi-retired now.
Tell us really quick about some of the things that you make, some of the things you've innovated. Brian was telling us about how he misuses the Motion Pro tool. You're probably going to get a cease and desist letter from them regarding the weird patent violation ways you're using those tools for axle. Hold your rear axle on or whatever.
There's no patent.
David seems to be doing it
by stock.
No, there's no patent violation because I have the patent. So if anybody's in trouble, they are.
Yeah. David seems to be doing it correctly. What are some of the things you're offering the moto community that Brian should probably be using to keep his rides a little more reliable?
Brian's got a different philosophy on these things. Number one, he's a cheap son of a gun, and he'll never pay for anything. He always tries to get it for free, and I won't give him anything. So he's got his own way of doing things. I don't know if he actually. The only thing I think that Brian uses that I sell is fork savers, the fork sleeves to protect the front forks. But
I bought those Google Tech filters because those are badass.
Yeah, Google Tech filters. We import Google Tech fuel filters from Italy and distribute them around the U.S. and the rest of the world. But I forgot what your question was.
You're making stuff that David, you're making stuff that Brian should be using. I guess. What do you have that he's not carrying?
Well, like I said, he's got a different way of doing things. Our big product is the cycle pump, which is the tire inflator, the 12-volt tire inflator. And then we make gauges, and then we have tire repair kits, and we've got tire changing tools, and just stuff that I like to make. Stuff I've invented most of it. And it's not necessarily something that Brian uses because it's a different discipline. And Brian's got a different way of doing things, and he's stubborn. He won't listen to me, even though I try to show him this is a better way. Pumps, gauges, tire repair gear, rope and pulley kits, just a bunch of different stuff.
Tell me about the rope and pulley kit. That's to recover a bike that's gone over a side of something, like down into a wash.
Yeah. Yeah, the story.
Have you guys used those? Brian,
Sorry?
have you used those?
I have 100% recovered a bike off the side of a hill, and I wish I listened to David and set up my rope and pulley kit, because 5 dudes with tow straps and a rope lowering a guy down the side of a cliff to tie off on a bike and then drag it up the side again.
Yeah, that's hard.
Maybe a rope and pulley kit would have been better.
You know, rope and pulley kit is the same idea that sailors used to raise sails. You know, they weren't dumb, so they just used ropes and pulleys, and they wrapped it around the pulleys as many times, and that gave them the mechanical advantage. So we developed a couple different kits. One is a trail kit that, you know, fits nicely on the tail of the KTM trail bike, and another one's a heavier duty kit for a big bore 1200 or something like that. But I've used them on the trail. I've hauled people out using the rope. We've done a couple of videos on how to recover and how to tow. I've done a whole bunch of videos on tire repair stuff. So yeah, Brian needs to be carrying one of my, actually it's not proprietary. It's just a Z-drag pulley kit. If you're a mountaineer or a sailor, you know all about it. It's just, we put it in a convenient package.
Brian, I see Lexi over there. Can you bring some of the kids in? I want to ask him a couple of things.
Come here, Enduro Mullet. Now's your chance. You can say hi to the world.
Okay. Okay, Enduro Mullet, can you give me like a spin here? We've heard a lot about this hairdo. I'm super stoked to see it.
Come on, now's not your time to be shy. Bring it over here. Let's see your luscious locks. Come on, Mike and George want to see you.
Running back to this.
All right, we made him shy. I understand. So Lexi, one of my favorite things of last year, I think it was the lead up to the Starvation Ridge race, where you had sort of gotten yourself clicked in with the community of women who were racing that event. And I want to ask you how supportive women were to you, and then maybe did you offer them some support to just try to encourage other women to be in the sport? I think you were how old when you did that race?
Well, like typically that race is like right after my birthday. So when when we have to register stuff, like I'll end up and in the odd end of the class, because I'll be next to booting out of the class and going to the next. But I distinctly remember going like up and down like the pits. I would get like random groups and random teams, like a cheer or like a way to go. And after that race, I would get like more support from other people. And as of recently, I've started like participating in like some ladies' rides that I've been invited to. In fact, I've had to like help mechanically and more like technically in one of the rides.
Let's see if Monique is watching after you towed her bike out for a while and scared the living crap out of her.
Oh, yeah,
she had to get off the bike and have somebody else ride it while you were towing it.
Yeah, she was not happy.
Are you
But
also
I've
doing?
definitely-
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish.
So I've tried to like give out some support, like in the more physical sense, especially to like the ladies community, and I'll partake in more like women-oriented rides too, especially in like October, where I'm gonna go to a official event sort of.
Yeah, the Stump Jumpers ladies ride will kick off in mid-October, so that's a big one. But now that she's got her own wheels, her little Toyota pickup truck and her dual sport KTM 525, she's a little bit well, that and school just finished, right? If it was actually still efficient at all. So yeah, she's a little bit more able to get out and meet up with people now. So we get phone calls and I tell Lex, hey, jump in the truck and drive here and go have a good time. Come back later.
So Lexi, I saw your birthday bike, this 525. It was insane. That's a big machine. I know grown men who don't want to ride a 525, and here you are, 16 years old. This is like your bike. Why are you so gutsy, and why do you want to like go out and do this? Man, this is like grown man stuff. Do you have something to prove, or is it just the fire that burns inside of you to do this?
We don't.
You might have to think.
We don't. It's more of like more of like
you're a driven. Let me say it like this: you're a very driven young woman, and it's impressive to see. Why are you like that?
I guess I would be more like driven to like prove, because like most kids my age or in like my high school don't even know what like riding a bike is like, or even like the stuff behind like maintaining or like working a bike.
For sure.
And with the 525, when I got on that thing, I was obviously too short. I could barely pick that thing up with all like the packs and stuff. And it was like my first BDR, and I just powered through it because like I knew that like I was having a fun time and an experience that most people would not get in like their lifetime.
That was a pretty crazy weekend. She got her bike on.
I was sick before that even happened, and I was like coughing out my lungs.
I think her birthday was on like a Wednesday. She got her bike on a Thursday, and on Friday she departed and rode like most of the Washington Backcountry Discovery route with Chris and Nathan Fant.
I was like,
who are BDR ambassadors. I think that's the proper term. And apparently had a really good time because everybody was super stoked like 3 days later when I drove down to pick them up.
Yeah. Got my like license.
So Brandon, if I understand what you say correctly, you weren't even on that ride. Dad wasn't even on that ride. She just went on her own.
I just got like
some other guys
and said like have fun and socialize.
Yeah.
So I got to do most of that ride with like new people. I got to learn like new names, got to socialize a bit, and
chase big adventure bikes around on your dual sport.
Yeah.
Hey.
Had some drop.
Hey, close the door, man. It changes the light in here. Sorry, technical issues.
Yeah, it's all good. Lexi, you got to do me a favor and like take 1 or 2 steps closer, just a little bit. There you go. Okay, perfect.
We'll get you
So, what? Perfect.
Now to do you gotta. All right, come on.
All right. So I have a question about your riding career, your riding future. Do you have any ride goals that you want to accomplish?
Well, there has been talk of like the VBAC 40 event, or not VBAC 40. What am I saying?
LA Barstow Vegas.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
I don't know what the heck. LA B2B.
Yeah.
And that would be like probably like an end goal for like a dual sport, like dual sporting really.
Yeah, we call that a mid goal because it's not that far away. I think it's reachable. We can probably do it this November. We'll find out.
It's more of like a goal that I can probably reach and more like accessible. Because I maybe like
a good one.
Yeah. I haven't had thoughts into it much, but like LA B2B is like a big one that's easy and accessible and more achievable at like my stage.
I think a lot of people would take exception with calling LA B2B easy, but it's not. But I think maybe we could make it look like it's easy, or maybe it would be a disaster, but we'll go do it and we'll find out.
Okay. How about some stuff up in the Northwest? I'm thinking like Tour of Idaho. Is that something you've ever explored? Thinking about it, the Idaho routes, Tour of Idaho routes?
Well, I haven't like heard or like researched much into it. I'm willing to do a lot of stuff, like as long as I have like the resources and stuff that I can like have at hand. Because like I have a bike and I have like a license and all that, and it would just be like a factor of like who would be there to help and support and such.
Yeah, that's the hard part. You want to go do like Tour of Idaho, you kind of need like a crew, but to find the right people to hang out with, that's a challenge. Because how many kids like in any of your classes ride their bikes? None. How many? That's kind of our challenge. Actually, we talk about that a lot. Is getting the kids together with people that have the same level of driven riding capability, and it's
of age.
It sounds like bragging, but it's really hard to find riding partners that want to go out and spend like 8 hours thrashing in the mountains.
We've had like
that's a tough one.
Yeah, we've had like races where we found people that are close to riding capability, but they've had like some falling outs with like integrity, I guess.
Yeah, that happens. So
But it's just
Yeah.
harder to find those sorts of
Yeah.
like people at like an age that's close to ours.
yeah, I would dearly love to have riding partners in the 13, 15, 16-year-old category there that could come out and hang. It's just really hard to find them because racing isn't necessarily what we're all about, but getting out and enduro as a form of entertainment as opposed to competition is what I'd love to get more kids into. That's part of why we ride so much is to try to put it out there like, hey, this is doable. If you think it's not attainable, these kids weren't crushing like mountain single track 4 years ago. It's been a steady progression. I mean, your bike has 120 hours on it in the past year or so.
More than that.
Yeah, probably more than that, according to the hour meter. So it's just lots and lots and lots of practice, time.
Just finding the willingness
Yeah.
of people that have the strong.
If you want it, it's attainable. You just got to want it. And moreover, find somebody else who wants it and go hang with them.
Yeah, so I guess you're in that situation of like being, say, just to use a name like Michael Phelps when he was a teenager. I'm sure he wanted to, hook up with kids who wanted to swim as much as he did and be as competitive as he was, and it was just very difficult, I can imagine, to be young and find people that shared your passion. Lexi, you seem to have it in your brothers, though. Do they like to ride as much as you? And you can tell me honestly, who's the best rider in your family?
Oh,
Okay.
oh! I wish Nate was standing here.
So
Come here,
we
mullet.
all have more of like a forte. So Nate, he's more of like a speed demon in like our family. Like he's openly competed with Dad. He's like gone neck and neck with a bunch of friends. He tried to put you off a mountain.
He did try to put me off a mountain, but I won. So Nate is definitely 100% the fastest between crashes.
Yeah. So like between all three of us, we have like a certain thing that we have. I just like to keep it slow, but I'll take the technical stuff as I can.
Yeah. Lex is about long-term endurance, not necessarily sprinting. But
yeah.
let's ride 24 hours straight and put down how many laps?
19.
19 laps of
19 with like 45-minute naps.
Yeah, 18 miles a piece and completely crush a race like that.
Yeah, and then so I would go for like endurance. Nate's more for like speed, and then Carl's more for like the technical areas. Like we've seen him tackle like rock faces that are like spooky to most like grown adults.
For sure, he bounces easier. That's for sure. Sometimes he has the advantage. He rides that 105 and the wheelbase is like that long. So he'll throw that thing through stuff that absolutely stymies some of us where we have to like stop and get off and push. He's got kind of an advantage sometimes. So
he's got bones of rubber.
Once the enduro mullet graduates up to a full-size bike, we'll see if he's able to maintain his
title,
his gnarliness.
So, Lexi, I hear you being very charitable to everybody, giving them props in their own little special area. You just got to tell me, it's just me and you talking here. You're the best rider of all of them, right?
He's got it.
Yes.
There we go. I knew it.
Lexi, I just want to bother you for one more question. You've been very nice. Thank you for listening to this and being a part of this. Do you see a future in Moto for yourself?
So I do, but maybe not in like maybe factory riding settings, like that high level, but like just maintaining like a good rider basis and like probably encouraging other people to like take up the sport as well. Because like when you go riding, like typically you can meet other people, you can also encourage other people and show people that like riding's not that like I wouldn't say like not that hard, but it's not that like impossible to like get into.
It's not unattainable, right? It's accessible. Yeah. You can do it.
Yeah, because most people don't understand that and say no, it's too destructive or no, it's too hard or something like that. So just being like a face that like proves that hey, it's not that impossible. You can do it. You can touch up on it or just try it for yourself.
So it sounds like I hear you saying that you want to be involved in the sport as a career path, potentially, maybe as a manufacturer's rep. Do you see yourself working for one of the suppliers or one of the brands and then kind of pushing the brand as well as the sport? Do you have any thoughts about any of that?
You know what's funny is we haven't really gotten into that. We, as obsessed as we are and as much as we ride, we're not very involved in, I guess, sort of the marketing and that other side of it.
We've kind of just been like riding our own ride and then like encouraging others to like take their own path. Really, we don't really go for like being the face of like a product or a market or something like that. Really,
it'd certainly be interesting, but it's just something I don't think we've ever really explored.
Yeah.
Maybe that is the way of the future. I keep talking about how I'm about to be unemployed, and I'm thinking to myself, what do I do to maintain the passion and do something that I love that can pay the bills at the same time? So who knows? I hadn't really considered it, honestly, until right now.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you.
I basically see.
If you have something that you really love, be very careful about turning it into a business.
Exactly.
The fun goes away.
Like it's not as much of a fun thing anymore.
Yeah.
Once it's the job, it's not as fun.
That's right.
Lexi, you're so well-spoken and so intelligent. I can see all of the rest of us working for you someday very soon, and I'll be happy to see your name at the bottom of my paycheck, and I'll be grateful for that.
Make it like the Taco Mike.
And then listen, I just have one last question, and then you can stay or go. It's totally up to you. I won't capture you any longer. Did I see, and refresh my memory if this is correct or not, I thought I saw that you went to a women's ride event and you were there as part of sort of like training staff or being there representing yourself, helping? Did I, maybe it was somebody else. Set me straight.
I don't know if that was.
Was that like recently, or was that just like a little talk of the town, something like that?
I don't know. Well, I mean, so she's been off on like a couple of ladies' rides in the last week or so.
And they're not like big official ones. More like just like a friend saying, "Hey, I want to get back into riding. Anyone out there?" And then I kind of got accepted and said, "Okay, I'll be there." And I kind of ended up as like technical support and then like little like pointers and tips.
Yeah, it's kind of Lex's forte there. So she's got a lot of background in mechanical and troubleshooting and a lot of background in trail fixing and recovery. So just by nature, anytime you get a group of people together, there's always going to be like that one bike or that one incident or that one moment where a little bit of extra attention or help is needed. And that's kind of where she shines. So like towing bikes out of the woods and jump starting other people's bikes and troubleshooting, trying to get them back to the trailhead a couple of days ago.
We didn't have the bump started. How to repeat.
That's right.
We got it working somewhere.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's just her.
Well, Lexi, you're an inspiration. Thank you. Thank you for being you, and thank you for doing what you do for your family and all the people that you ride with and your friends. As I've been looking through the comments here, I'm just basically seeing lots of stuff that says, "Go Lexi, man, she'll be a great engineer someday. Lexi can do anything." Somebody mentioned, wasn't she a leader in a ride last week? It's kind of, you could go through these comments later, but you'll see that there's a lot of support for young people like you, Lexi, who are especially women in the sport. I advocate and encourage you to continue. I think you'll do great and you'll go far if you wanted to pursue this sport further. So good on you. You're the best.
Hey, Mike, that's actually a good note there. Is I kind of floated the idea a couple of days ago about doing a series of women's mechanical clinics. And just out of curiosity, I mean, a whole bunch of people popped up and said, wow, that would be amazing. So
yeah, just like small fixes that you could do at your home or like on the trail that's like simple and easy.
Yeah,
or like something that's a good thing to know, like have under your belt.
All that stuff that you ask questions about, like what should be in my toolkit, and gosh, my favorite questions: what tires and what oil and whatever. But simple things like my brake pads are worn out. How do I replace them? Can we rebuild split case motors from the bottom up? Yeah, but that's not really what it's all about. It's about making basic maintenance achievable for like your average rider who says, I really don't know anything about it. I want to learn and come on out. So we'll probably host some ladies mechanical clinics in the very near future.
Yes, I would love to see that. Maybe even a YouTube. Lexi, I could listen to a YouTube video of you teaching somebody how to change brake pads or something like that. I can totally visualize that. So I'd love to put that on your probably long list of summertime projects you're already involved in.
There you go.
David, do you have anything to say, kind of jump into that, where you've seen Lexi impress you with either her mechanical abilities or any of the things you've seen on Brian's social feed with the Agogi, the Instagram thing they've got going on?
Yeah, I follow a lot of this stuff, and I see these kids out there doing stuff that I wouldn't try. And Brian's obviously mentored them, but they get in there and they get their hands dirty, and you've got gears spread out all over the table, and they can actually apparently remember how to put them back together. I can take anything apart. It's the getting it back together that's a problem. But the kids seem to be fearless. They've got enough mentoring and oversight so that they can do these things and be successful at it. But yeah, I've never seen a young lady like Lex or Nate or Carl that have had this level of mechanical aptitude and able to carry it out. And I guess it's a function of the fact that if they want to ride, they're going to have to do the work. Yeah. Because these are not new bikes; they're all older bikes that have a lot of maintenance issues, and they ride hard, and they're going to break. And if you're going to ride, you're going to have to fix what you ride. So it's out of necessity, but they've had a good teacher. One of the things that Brian did was he instructed people in the art of war, and he learned how to do that, and he's taken that skill and ability and translated it to his kids. Now they're picking up things that most people never have a chance to do it. I thought my dad was pretty good at teaching me how to do things. It was never on the level of what I see with Brian and his kids. So if I wore a hat, I would tip it to you and say, well done.
I agree. Brian, talk about the military. Talk about. I want to drop back to where we left off earlier in the pregame show, where we talked about fellowship and brotherhood in a unit and fellowship and brotherhood on the trail. How are they similar?
I think that few things build friendship and brotherhood like shared hardship. I guess would be the way to phrase it. So when you go out, whether you grab all your moto buddies and you go on like the crazy hell ride where you get back, you're like, man, that was terrible. And then 2 weeks later, you're bragging about it to all your friends. Or you go to ranger school or you go to airborne school or something like that. Like shared hardship builds camaraderie in a way that I think is difficult to quantify to people who've never actually undergone like real hardship. And I'm sure there's a million ways you could pick apart my argument right now. I'm not a sociologist or any other sort of ologist. I just find that by going out and sharing hardship, you develop, great friendships. And, when a guy calls and says, I need a hand, I'm one of us is going to be there. So that parallel is pretty important to me.
One to add to that, what Brian just said, going on a ride where everything goes just perfectly and it's a smooth ride and it's a beautiful day. That's nice.
Nobody tells stories about that one, though.
Nobody tells stories. You don't remember those rides. What you do remember are the rides where your bike went off the edge of the trail and it took 4 of you to haul it back, or you broke down and you used a paper clip to fix the master cylinder, or it was such a terrible trail that everybody had to push somebody else's bike. It's those things that are memorable. And I remember one episode on the Idaho BDR. It was the most horrible day of my life. I had heat prostration. I was exhausted. We had to portage bikes around this terrible swamp. But looking back on that now, that was one of the richest memories of my life. It's the hardship that sticks in our mind. It's the overcoming. It's that challenge that we face as men, and we succeed. And that builds us into who we are. So, those hardships on the trail are what makes the trail so good.
I don't know if we talked about it in the pregame or earlier in the whatever this is called, but oh man, now I forgot where I was going. The mullet distracted me over here. But like rites of passage and doing hard stuff is not really, doesn't seem to be in vogue very much in the West. I've spent a lot of time in places where that's actually very important, but here in the U.S., the rite of passage, whether it just isn't really a thing, right? And I think a lot of us define ourselves, for better or for worse, by how we've overcome adversity, whether it was self-induced or externally induced or whatever. But how we overcame, how we persevered, how we developed as a person, I think a lot of times is guided by our reactions to adversity. So that's pretty important when I'm out, whether it's with my friends or with the kids or both or what.
Yeah, it used to be, you'd have to go out and kill the bear with a spear. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And, in today's modern world, men seldom face hardship or adversity. There's work adversity and, I didn't get my report done on time. But the real things that challenge us physically and mentally, that make it too hot or too cold or too high or too low, whatever it is, it's really hard. Those are the things that help us as men to feel like we're alive. And I think that's one of the great things about being on a motorcycle, especially dirt bike riding. I ride street. I got 5 motorcycles, and I ride ADV and I ride small KTM trail bikes. So I've got a bunch of different disciplines there, different opportunities. But the best challenge that I face is on those KTM 450s on a narrow single track, where I'm busting my butt and I'm falling down, and facing a hill that I'm not sure I can make it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But when I make it to the top, I feel good. There's something inside a man that he has the need to be challenged and to overcome that. And unfortunately, too many men don't get that opportunity. And that's the beauty of riding in the dirt, is the challenge. And I've never taken drugs, but I'd have to say that riding trail bikes is like taking cocaine, because you are so focused, so on. You have to be right there all the time. It's just this tunnel that you see. That is such a high to be facing that. Be looking down to the right, and there's nothing down there, and your left handlebar is scraping against the hill on the left side, and your heart is thumping, and you're thinking, look at the trail, look at the trail. Those are the challenges that make dirt bike riding so enjoyable, so good, so fulfilling.
For sure.
Brian, you have had experience taking other vets, other guys out on Moto. How does Moto help you keep your head on straight, and how have you seen it do that with other guys?
Yeah, that's a whole conversation by itself. But I mentioned it when we were talking ahead of this, that I came back from an all expenses paid tour to lovely Afghanistan in 2012, and I decided I was 100% done with the Army. I'd had enough. This is bullshit, and I quit. And I went through the whole process of actually like out processing and leaving the service, only to basically drag my packet out of the hands of the clerk on a Friday afternoon and say, I'll come back on Monday. And I never went back. What I found was that I need something at home that wasn't all Army, wasn't all the time, but it was something that I could immerse myself in and drive myself to, something that could require anything from single-minded focus to I guess the obsession level that I had with the profession. So I don't know where I was going with this, but what it did was it created a vehicle for me to really kind of examine the things that I think about and my expectations of myself and of others. And it created, I guess, a new pool of friends that I could immediately fall into. A bunch of dudes with dudes and women with somewhat similar interests. And what I what I found, I did that kind of on my own. I sort of figured it out, and then later on, we decided that we'd start doing that with groups of veterans, because I think the Moto obsession provides that opportunity to face adversity, to test yourself, to do dangerous stuff, to be the adrenaline junkie that's sometimes in all of us, and to have a shared, to have a shared, not occupation. What am I talking about? A shared pursuit that everybody can bond over, and that's, like we said before, there's nothing bonds you like going through adversity together. So if you're home, you're having a hard time, and you know who to turn to or who to talk to, I can pick up the phone and call any of a dozen people right now and say, man, I'm having a hard time, and there'd be someone to talk to, and that's what we were doing with veterans program that we ran a little bit earlier, and it's what we'll get back into.
David, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you told me earlier how you'll get to the point where you feel like you're sitting inside of four walls so much, I like to say under fluorescent lights, that you just need to get out and experience nature and hardship. And you talked about like expose yourself to hot and cold and all that. What does doing this, and also exposing yourself to risk? I know you kind of mentioned that. Talk about your experience with what Brian was talking about.
Well, my personal experience is, in my life as I lead it now, I'm kind of retired and I run my business out of my home. I shut down my brick and mortar business and, no more employees. So I do it all myself. Got a wonderful wife that I love dearly. She's got a beautiful garden, 750 hosta plants. It's the Garden of Eden. But I find myself stuck at home. Yeah, shut up, Brian.
You in that garden.
Yeah. I find myself isolated in this domestic bubble, and I can feel the tension rising in myself. I wouldn't call it anxiety, but I'd call it a need to get out there and, for lack of a better word, bang the drums with a bunch of men. To get out of the house, to go see my buddies, to spend some guy time. If women got together, they would chat and chat and chat. They'd be chattering away. For guys to get together, I could go to Brian's place and we could sit there and drink a beer, and we might belch, we might fart, we actually might talk for 2 hours. And we wouldn't have said much, but we didn't need to say much. It's just the presence of being with guys. But being on the bike adds an element to it. There's been many words written about what is it like to be on a motorcycle, and how does it touch us? How does it get into our innermost being? There's a certain amount of thrill, a certain amount of carefully calculated risk, depending on your risk acceptance level. There's the feeling of power and the freedom, the going out, the conquering the trail, ADV ride from, all the way across to Montana, or BDR or whatever, or even if it's just on the pavement, exploring Colorado and all the passes, something like that. But it's just a matter of getting away and being with guys. And, being with a spouse, even if you love them, there's a time when a guy needs to get out and be with the guys. And I can't quite put it into words, but I know the feeling. I know that when I've been out and done that, when I come back, I'm a better person for it. Doesn't mean I don't miss the wife or want to be with her, but she can't do the things that I do. I've taken her places where I never should have taken her on the bike, and look back and say, what was I thinking? But we came through it okay. So I prefer to do that stuff by myself with a bunch of guys that are willing to share those same risks, that understand it, and the common shared experience of the ride and the challenge, the hardship, the adversity. Like I said, the hot, the cold, the wet, the too dry. Those are the the rich things of life. And you look back on that and say, God, that was a terrible trip as soon as you're off the bike. But 6 months later, you want more of it. You want to do it again.
So you guys are really making a point that I try to make all the time around campfires or when I'm with other guys. And that is, we experience and yearn to experience what we did in our caveman, primal, tribal situations, where in our tribal society, when we were pre-modern, right? So 100,000 years ago, we lived in a tribe. There were two tribes within a normal unit. We had the men's tribe, where we would do the things that we're just talking about right here, where we would go on a hunt. We would go out and conquer something. We would go adventure somewhere. We would see something new. And then in the pre-plan of that adventure, we would talk about our equipment. So I'm drawing parallels between what we did then as men and what we do now, right? So we would sharpen our spears, and then Brian would show up with the limp spear, and it'd be ridiculous, and we'd make fun of him. And then David would show up with like a cool shiny one, and he'd have a spear that big, right? And David would show up. His would be over-engineered and very well designed, and then I'd show up with something that I stole. And so we would just make fun of you.
You got to understand, I actually lived in that time period.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes, I can tell by your hair and your glasses. Yes. Okay, so what we're doing right now is what we do. We do it around the campfire, and we would pre-plan, and we would talk about our equipment and make fun of each other. And then we would look at maps, we'd draw them on the ground, whatever. We would go through this process, this experience together. And then we would leave that other society where we also had women and children and the elderly and those that we cared for and had stewardship over. And we would go off on our own. And like you said, David, so beautifully, we would talk or not talk. I know that there would probably be moments where we would stand on the edge of a ravine and look at the river at the bottom and watch the sun go down. And maybe we didn't say a damn thing, but there was so much communication that was happening with each other and together in those moments. And we would process life together. We would live life together. And we did that through risk and adventure and using tools and equipment and all of the things that we do on a motorcycle trip. 100% the same, 100% parallel. And when we live in a suburban, modern American situation like what, David, you were talking about, sometimes the glow of the fluorescent lights can eat away at your soul so much that you're crawling out of your skin and you can barely take it. There's a tension and a drama that happens inside of me anyway. And I know that my stress level is being elevated, and I know that my pop-off valve is getting ready to burst. And one of the ways that I have found that reliably releases that is through camaraderie, fellowship around motorcycles. When you add gasoline and rubber tires to a group of dudes, in my experience, there is this huge burden and a weight, and I breathe like this big, exhaustive sigh. Like as soon as I look around, this is what happens to me. As soon as I look around and I know that there's no woman to offend and no child to corrupt, and it's just the bros, and whatever's gonna happen, what are you doing?
Lex is just off camera listening, so I'm laughing, and she's laughing. But anyway. Continue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you get the idea. As soon as I realize that it's nobody but just the dudes, and whatever we say is what we say, and nobody gives a crap, and it's just going to all be cut loose, and we're going to burn gas and melt tires and do crazy, stupid stuff, I believe in my brain something happens that I turn into the pure caveman animal that I really am, and I'm in my most elemental state. I'm the most like pure and real and alive that I ever am. And then, like what David said so beautifully, you're on a single track where all of my attention and consciousness is like straight up focused to stay alive. I'm not thinking about anything but just surviving the trip, that rock, and don't crash, don't die, all of that stuff. When all of that is synced up and I'm plugged into that, I don't ever want to stop. I don't ever want that to end. And you throw in car rides on the way up and talks about life and just the shit that you're dealing with, and you process that with your brothers, and you sit around and have campfire talks, and taco dinner talks, all that stuff. You wrap all that together. When it's over, I miss it. In the days, the very next days after finishing a trip, it's all I can do to focus on something I just think about that over and over. And then you got the text thread where you can share pictures and relive the trip. It's always too long for the very next one. So I just say that because I'm talking to the choir here, right? You guys live this, you know this. And I hope if anybody's listening out there who wonders if Moto is something that could offer them, Moto with guys, and this is the key. It's got to be with brothers. It's got to be with dudes you trust and you have faith and confidence in. If you're living your life and you feel like, David kind of expressed, living in this bubble. For me, the words I would say is living in the walls of just I can feel like the walls closing in on me and my brain. And if you're sort of running that program right now, you're feeling all that, I would suggest strongly get yourself plugged into a little network of dudes who go out and have fun and do adventures and do it outside and do it often and do it well at a really high level. And I know Brian is doing that. That's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to get him on here, is because I really believe that he's trying to do that for himself and clearly for his kids and then his community, the guys he is sort of a leader and a guide to. And David, I know you're doing that. Maybe I'm trying to do that in my own little ways too, but this is more important than just going out and goofing off. For some of us, it's what is straight up keeping us alive. For some of us, it's what keeps our head on our shoulders. It keeps us from doing really, really awful things to ourselves and other people. So I think we've gone on, looking at the ticker here, it's about an hour and a half, and that typically to me feels about right in terms of the timeline. So I'll be quiet. I just ran on there for a minute or two. I would like to have you guys wrap up and share anything you'd like to say about what you feel maybe your mission is in this sport, what you feel your mission is to the fellowship and the brotherhood of Moto. And with that, we'll just kind of wrap this thing up and close it down.
You got it, David?
Yeah, I got something. I've been waiting for the right moment. It hasn't come up yet, but I think now's a good time. I don't know if this will show up.
Bring it.
Let's see.
What, another? Okay, here we go.
I was hoping to be able to pop this up at some point, but it never raised its ugly head. You got to understand the relationship I have with Brian is, where's my focus, is unique. I'm the parent, so to speak, and kind of keep Brian under control. The wizened.
You're the adult in the room.
Well, the wizened village elder. And Brian's the young brave that wants to go out and wage war on the other tribes. Anyhow, the back and forth between him and I, it's a mutual respect, and we tease a lot, and I think that's a sign of a healthy relationship when you can tease your buddies. When you can kind of make fun of them, you can in a good-natured way, never mean-spirited. If I like somebody, I'm teasing them. If I don't talk to them. Brian and I are the admins for the PNW Dirt Talk. I got a couple thousand people in that group, and that's where most of Brian's stuff is shown on the.
Kickstand gate.
Is this Kickstand Gate? Is that what this is? Okay. I hoped that would come up, and I'm glad it did.
The hashtag that lives 2,000 people in a group.
Yeah. And the reason, actually, not to get off on that too far, the reason that we ended up with that group is because both of us got booted off another group.
Too free-spirited.
Yeah. Anyhow. But, having a friend like Brian and, being able to tease each other and get good counsel and, that fellowship is very important. As for my role, what do I think my role is? Well, the truth of it is that I'm 65 and I'm kind of easing out of things. I don't have the stamina or the endurance or the ability or everything else to continue doing the young man's game like you guys are. But I kind of sit back there in the background as a distinguished village elder, still participate, still do what I can for the community. A lot of my motivation, even though I run a business, it's more about supporting the community. If I find out something, I share it with others and try to do it without any cost. And I think I've done well in that regard. Not bragging, but written books on how to ride off road, made videos on how to do things, and established myself as somebody that might know a little bit about what he's talking about. And I want to continue that as the years go on. But I want to have more time to play and to ride with these guys, and working towards that goal to where I can simplify my life a little bit more. So, that's where I see myself headed.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I've just noticed some of the comments here too, and I'll give you a quick piece of prop that I've seen many times. As people have said that your books have helped them, that you have been you have been that wise village elder to the community, and I appreciate that and hope it continues forever. Honestly,
village elder, village idiot.
Let's get to you, Brian, the village idiot. I think that's the hat we need to make for you. How do you wrap this thing up?
Is it madness or is it genius? I don't know.
All right. Walk us home. Let's shut this thing down, Brian. Thank you. I'll just maybe say my final piece here. I appreciate you guys both being willing to do this. It honors me to have you both on here. Brian, any parting thoughts for us?
Man, let's get out and ride. Whether it's a work day, like I organize work parties, but I'll be out riding again this weekend. Let's just get out and ride. It's not unreachable. I've hooked people up with extra bikes. I have some that actually run. There's definitely a bike I would put under David before I would put it under anyone else. But let's get out and ride. It's all about the passion for life and the passion for having a good time and hanging out with good people and just living. So let's get out and do it. Let's volunteer. Let's work together, and let's ride motos.
Right on.
Okay. Well said, my dude. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody who's watching. Thanks, David. Thank you, Brian. Everybody have a good night. Go out and get some adventure.
Hell yeah. See you on the trail.
See you guys. Bye, Lexi. Lexi, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us on. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. See ya. Ciao. Boom. Out.